What is up, you guys? Today we're continuing the mini series that we started last week about camera basics, and in last week's video we talked about ISO and how it complements shutter speed and aperture when in dark situations. Now in this case we're going to talk about aperture. Now aperture is the capacity of a lens to open up and let more or less light into the sensor. Now it achieves this with a set of diaphragm blades inside the lens that, wait, let me show you. Okay. So in this case, we can see inside that it opens up. These are the blades inside and they close up. Now these blades control the aperture. Here it's wide open and it's letting in a lot of light into the sensor, and here it's all the way closed. Now wide open, it allows you to shoot in darker situations, allowing more light to get into the sensor, and closed up allows you to shoot in brighter situations. So that's the way you can control the exposure of your image. Now aperture not only controls the amount of light that goes into the sensor, but also the depth of field. Now the depth of field is the amount of the image that's going to be in focus from your camera to your subject. Now let's say that you're shooting a photograph this way with your camera and you're shooting it wide open at 1.2. That means that the portion of the image that's going to be in focus is going to be in a frank little line over here of 1.2. Everything from the camera to your subject is going to be out of focus. Your subject is going to be in focus, and everything behind it as well is going to be blurred out. Now as you start closing up your aperture, your depth of field is going to start becoming bigger. Now let's say you're shooting at f2.8. Now that depth of field, or the amount of portion of the image in focus, is going to be this big. Let's say you stomp it out to f4. Now this part of the image is going to be in focus. So a lot more of your image is going to start being in focus. Now let's stop down all the way to f16, and your whole panorama is going to be in focus. So when you see those images where the subject is isolated and the background and the foreground are blurred out, most likely that image was taken with an aperture wide open. On the other hand, when you see a photograph taken where the subject is in focus and also the background, most likely that image is taken with a closed up aperture ring, maybe an f4, maybe an f8, or an f16. So as we know, there are two types of lenses. There are prime lenses and then there are zoom lenses. Normally prime lenses have a faster aperture, going up to 1.4 or 1.2, letting a lot more light in and making all those backgrounds crispy and blurry and buttery. Meanwhile, zoom lenses have two types of apertures. There are the ones with a variable aperture. That means as you zoom in, your image is going to start getting darker as the aperture is closing up, and the ones with a fixed aperture, maybe an f4, 2.8, maybe even a 1.8. That means even though if you zoom in, your aperture is going to remain the same when you started zooming in. Now, having said that, lenses that open up a lot more are more expensive. For example, the 1.2 lenses are very expensive, and in zoom ranges, the 2.8 lenses are very expensive, much more expensive than the f4s or the variable aperture lenses. Now, when we talked about the aperture blades inside the lens, that also determines the quality of the out of focus elements that we're going to get, whether it's going to be more noisy or more distracting or more buttery smooth. That largely depends on the amount of blades in the diaphragm. So higher end lenses with 9 blades or even 11 have a very buttery smooth background, or bokeh as it's called. Meanwhile, lenses with, let's say, 5 or 7 aperture blades have a more disturbing or more noisy background. So when buying a lens, I always recommend going for a faster aperture lens. We say faster aperture not because the lens is fast, but because it allows you to shoot at faster shutter speeds, allowing your image to be more brightened up. So when I'm looking for a lens, I'm always looking for a fast aperture lens. If I'm looking for a prime lens, maybe a 1.4 will be a very good option. And in zoom lenses, the aim is always to get those 2.8 lenses, the 16-35, the 24-70, and the 70-200, all at that maximum aperture of 2.8. Having said that, they are very expensive, but that's the holy trinity of lenses. We're going to talk about that maybe in another video. And that's it for today, guys. I hope I was clear. If you did like the video, can you please give it a like and consider subscribing? Hit the notification bell to be notified when I upload the next video. I'm Fuentes. Cheers to all of you, and I'll see you on Sunday.